and welcome to another Lawn Fawn video. Today we are introducing our brand new stamp set, One in a Chameleon Flip-Flop, and its coordinating dies. And I love this little guy because he is one of my favorite characters flip-flopped. So he is looking in the opposite direction of the original One in Chameleon. I love using this guy on his own and mixing and matching him with the original, and we're going to be doing that, including making a swish and pop in today's video. And we're also going to be featuring our Thinking of You line border die, and this die is so cute and perfect for a bold sentiment. So let's go ahead and check these products out. First up, we're going to stamp out this cute little chameleon. I just love him so much. Here is a little branch for him to sit on to kind of help set the scene. And we've got a little cluster of leaves and then a heart and an individual leaf. And the little leaves, you can layer them on to that little branch there to kind of help set the scene again. And then we've got that cute little heart. And then we also have the sentiment, "You color my world." Next up, I'm going to use some Copic markers to color this guy in, although I think he'd be really fun with watercolors. And one of the things I love about this little character is it's really fun to color him in unexpected colors. A bright pink, a purple, a blue, green like I'm doing here, of course, is a little more traditional. The other really fun way to color this guy in is to do him in a full rainbow. And we have some cute cards from the design team that we're going to show you in the end that do just that. I have a pretty big gap between my markers there. I don't have all of these markers, so I'm touching the light marker to a marker just a little bit above it to kind of help blend them in. And by touching the light marker to that darker marker, it kind of creates a medium shade and really makes it easier to blend those colors together. And that's a great way to make your markers work if you don't have quite that many of them. I'm coloring in a very light blue for the eye, a little green for these leaves, and then we're going to do this branch. And I really love coloring in branches like this because you can be really imperfect about it because it's going to look like the details of the wood. So you can see I'm being kind of very stripey and not worrying too much about my blending. I want it to kind of look a little unrealistic. So you see I'm kind of going back and forth between my colors and letting it be a little imperfect. Once again, touching the light marker to the medium to help me blend in just a little bit. Next up, we're going to take a look at the coordinating dies. You can bend these dies apart at the tabs, or you can use your wire snips to separate them. We're going to take those dies and line them up with the stamped images, hold it in place with some low tack tape. I'm using some post-it note tape here. Run it through the die cut machine, and we're going to have perfectly cut out images. Look how just cute and sweet this guy is. Now here is a look at all of the images from this cute little mini set and the ways you can kind of mix and match them, adding the leaves to the branches, adding a little heart above him, layering him onto the branch. So cute and so fun. And Shari has two cards coming up in this video. The first one, she's going to show us how to use this One in a Chameleon Flip-Flop stamp on its own with a super cute rainbow theme. And then the next card is a really cool swish and pop using the ladybug and leaf, which you guys have to check out. So take it away, Shari.
So for this card, I'm just going to use the One in a Chameleon Flip-Flop mini set here, and I've already colored and cut out my little chameleon. I've colored him purple. He's going to be at the end of a rainbow. I've also cut out the stitched scallop square from some spiffy speckles paper as well as a piece of white paper, and I'm going to use the sentiment that also comes in this set that says, "You color my world." I'm going to stamp this along the bottom of that white square with some black ink. And then I'm going to use the Puffy Cloud border dies to cut the top of this piece to make some clouds that my rainbow is going to go into and my little chameleon is going to sit on. So I'm just going to hold this in place with a little bit of washi tape and run it through my die cut machine, and then I'll have some clouds for the bottom of my square, and I'll still have that nice stitching and scallop detail around the bottom and the two sides. I'm going to use the stitched rainbow die to make my rainbow. I've already cut my pieces out here, and that background piece, I've actually cut it from some typing paper in this case instead of cardstock. And I did that because I'm going to be die cutting the end off, and I didn't want to cut through too many pieces of cardstock. I've got a piece of scrap paper, and I'm just going to put my adhesive all over this piece of typing paper that's cut in the arch. That way, all these bows of the rainbow will sit right on there and will have some adhesive to stick to. So I'm cut these bows out of chili pepper cardstock, fake tan cardstock, sunflower cardstock, Cilantro cardstock, and then that last one is peacock cardstock. And now that my rainbow is all together, I'm going to place it where I want it to be on this square. I'm going to kind of just hold it in place, and I'm going to take the die that I used to cut out the square and I'm going to line it back up. You can kind of shift it around and fill when it sort of pops in place with those stitching lines and that scallop. I'm going to hold it in place on the rainbow with some tape, and I'm going to run that through my die cut machine, and then I'll have the rainbow cut off with that scallop detail on the edge. Now I can go ahead and adhere this to my background piece, and you see you get that nice finished scallop edge to that rainbow. So for my card base, I have a piece of kraft cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 4 1/4, and I'm going to put some stamping on the background. I'm using that Woodgrain Backdrop stamp and some dough ink to create a tone-on-tone wood grain card base. And that'll just have a nice pattern around the outside of my square. I'm adding a piece of foam tape to those clouds that I cut, so that's going to kind of pop up off that background a little bit. And then I'm going to lay my little chameleon on there. He's not glued down yet. And I'm going to use the solid heart that comes in this little stamp set. I'm going to stamp with some pigment ink. So I'm using some Distress Oxide in Abandoned Coral. And I'm just going to stamp some solid hearts in the sky above his head. And I wanted to do that stamping before mounting it on the card base because I'm going to use foam tape to mount this on the card base. So I've put that tape all over the back of this square, and I'm just going to center it up. You can see you get that nice wood grain around the outside edges. Now I can add my little chameleon. He's going to sit on this big bump of the cloud. I'm just going to add a little bit of liquid glue to that bump to glue him down. And you can see I didn't color the eye because I wanted to add a little googly eye, so I'm going to add a glue dot to his eye. And then I've pulled out of my stash the googly eye that matches the size of his eye perfectly. And here is my finished card. I just think it's so cute. This is going to be a Swish and Pop interactive card, and I am going to combine the new 1 in a Chameleon Flip-Flop stamp set with the original 1 in a Chameleon stamp set. I'm starting out with a piece of Bristol cardstock cut to 5 1/2 by 4 1/4, and I'm going to be inking this up with some distress inks. I'm starting out with scattered straw, then I'm going to bring in some spiced marmalade, and then finally some worn lipstick. So the look I'm going for is a warm tone, sort of sunset sky. But I don't want it to be too dark because I'm actually going to do some stenciling over top of it as well. So I'm pulling in the warm lipstick here from the top down. And then I'll just go back and forth between my colors until they're nicely blended out. So I'm going back with the spiced marmalade and blending out that line between the two. You can see that I'm not going all the way to the bottom because there's no need to ink the bottom. That part is going to get covered up by a panel that's going to hide the Swish and Pop mechanism. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the holes for the Swish and Pop into the background. I'm going to do the other parts to it in just a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and cut these holes. You want to line up that little arm of the die with the right side of your cardstock, and then you want to line it up with the bottom. So this is the minimum, the closest to the bottom that these holes can go for this die to work correctly. If it's any lower, you'll see the mechanism, but it can go higher. In my case, I need it right where it needs to be, so I'm lining it up with the bottom and the right side. Now that those holes are cut, I'm going to do some stenciling on this background. So I've just put some removable adhesive on the back of the panel to hold it onto my mat here. And then I'm going to use some magnets to hold the bayou stencil in place. For this background, I'm only using the leaves. I'm not going to use the vines, just the leaves. And I'm going to shift it up quite high because I don't want those leaves to go behind my panel that's going to go at the bottom. So I'll just hold this in place with some magnets, and then I'm going to use some pigment ink through here. So I'm using some Distress Oxide because it's a pigment-based ink. And I know that this color is going to sit on top of the colors that I've already blended into the background. So it's going to really pop off that background. I'm using some Seedless Preserves. This is a purple color, but it's a very reddish purple, so I feel like it goes with the colors of the background very well. I'm just pouncing that around, turning it both ways, making sure that I get the ink into all these openings of the stencil. Then I'm going to add some water. So this is a mini mister. It is filled with water as well as some lawnfawn liquid stardust. So it's sort of a shimmery water. You can see I've put some post-it notes down to protect the bottom of my panel. And I'm just going to wipe off some of that excess ink that's on the stencil. And then I'm just going to give it a light mist across the stencil. So this water is going to go in those openings. And you're going to get some shimmer, but it's also going to move that ink around a little bit, make them a little less perfect in the background, make them look more like a watercolor look. So I'm just going to heat it with a heat tool to kind of dry it faster. And now I'm going to work on my part that goes on the front. So the way I'm looking at this is like it's a log or a tree that's fallen, and then we've got some vines growing on it. So I've got a piece of brown Woodgrain cardstock, and I'm going to do some stenciling on top of it as well. Also with the Bayou backdrop stencils, but for this one I'm going to use both pieces. So I'm starting out with the vines, and I'm going to use pigment ink, so Distress Oxide ink, on this part as well. Because I'm using a darker cardstock, I want that ink to stand out from that cardstock. I switched over to my blending brush for this because I felt like it got into the small openings of these vines better. And I'm using Twisted Citron for this first color. So this is the lighter of my two greens that I'm going to use on this log with all the vines growing on it. So you can see when I pull this away how that ink sits on top of that brown cardstock. Now I can line up the other part of the seam builder die, which is the leaves. And then I'm going to go in with Lucky Clover Distress Oxide for the leaves. So this is a bit darker, but it's really going to pop off that kraft cardstock and look like we have a log with all these fun green things growing on it. Making sure I get all the way to those corners up there and make sure everything's blended in there nicely. And then when I pull this off, you're going to see this log with the vines. So the part of the Swish and Pop that's going to move on my card is this very large leaf from the Ladybug and Leaf die set. I'm cutting the solid piece from some Rainforest cardstock. I also cut the frame from Rainforest, which I'm going to layer on top. I've just put adhesive all over that background. And then you can see I've also cut the insides of the leaves from some Peacock and some Cilantro cardstock. So I'm just going to take those and pop them into those openings that are left there from the frame. And since I put adhesive all over it, those are going to stick right in there. Kind of like putting together a puzzle. I'm going to make sure it's all stuck down with my bone folder. And then here are my two little chameleons from both of those stamp sets. I've already colored them and cut them out. I've also cut out some of the little leaves from the Flip-Flop set, and I'm going to use those to decorate around my chameleons when I get them on my card. Now I'm going to work on the other elements of the Swish and Pop. I've cut that arm that we're going to pull from some Rainforest cardstock, and then I've cut the part that's going to move with the leaf from some acetate. I cut two of those arms, or those tabs that we're going to pull, and I'm going to laminate them together with some glue so that we have a really thick pull tab. And the reason why I'm doing this is because the part that we're moving is going to be that leaf, and it's pretty big and it's kind of heavy. And so this is just going to reinforce that tab so we have a nice strong tab to pull. I have some mini brads. I'm going to put that mini brad through the hole at the end of this pull tab, and then I'm going to put it through the first hole of the acetate. You can open that up. That's not going to go anywhere. And then I'll take that second brad and put it through that second hole of the acetate, and then this is going to go through one of the holes on the background that we cut. Then I can flip that over and just open up the arms of that brad, and that will stay in place as well. And you can see how that's going to move. For this piece that's going to layer on the front, I need to cut the little notch so that you can grab the tab and pull it. So I'm just going to line it up where everything is going to go, and then I'm going to use the die that comes with the Swish and Pop, and you line up that arm of the die with the right side of the card, and then those two little notches that stick out, you line that up with the top and the bottom of that pull tab, and that's going to cut you a little tab so you can grab it, and it gives you a nice stitching detail as well. Just be sure to cut this out before you glue this piece to your card. I'm also going to use the new Thinking of You line border die for the sentiment on this card. I'm cutting it from some black cardstock, and then I'm just going to layer it on the bottom on the log that we created with the vines. I'm just going to put a lot of dots of glue because this is a very detailed and fine die cut. And then I'm just going to carefully layer this along the bottom. So I'm going to use my grid mat to help make sure I get it nice and straight. And I cut this from a piece of cardstock that's already 5.5, so it should be perfectly the correct size. I can just line up the ends with the edges of my card, and I don't have to worry about trimming anything off. I just happen to have that piece of black cardstock already in my stash, so that made that pretty easy. And then I'm just going to add a few dots of glue so I can add the dots on the eyes. Now I can go ahead and put this background onto my card base since that brad is in place. So I'm just adding adhesive on all the edges, and I'm making sure to avoid where that brad is so nothing gets stuck to it. You can see that's going to move freely. And then now what I'm going to do is draw some pencil lines. You see I shifted that down so that you won't see my pencil line, and I'm working on where I can put my foam tape without getting in the way of that mechanism and that leaf moving. So I've just sort of laid that leaf on there. It's not even really stuck down, but it's moving around to where I can see what it's doing. So I can see how far I want it to go and how far it's going to go that direction. Make sure my foam tape is missing that mechanism. And then for this one, I'm actually doubling up the foam tape. So once I've got that foam tape in place, I can pull off those liner papers. And then I'll just pop this piece that's going to go on the bottom right onto that foam. So now for my leaf, I'm going to put 2 glue dots on this arm because this leaf is pretty big. And then that's going to hold it onto this acetate arm and allow it to move. I'm going to put my little chameleon because that needs to hide behind there, so I'm just getting good placement of exactly where that leaf should go to hide that chameleon behind there. And then I've got it in its starting position, and I can trim off that arm. And then I can also take my scissors and trim off that extra piece of acetate that's sticking out past the leaf, because now I know how long I need that acetate arm to be. So I'm going to add my little purple chameleon that's going to hide behind the leaf. And I'm just checking that she's hidden there. And then I've got one of the birch trees that I've cut from some brown cardstock. And this is going to be the branch that this chameleon's sitting on. There is a little branch in the stamp set, but I wanted it to be a little bit longer on this card and come off the side. So I'm using the tree instead. And then I'm using some of those little leaves that I cut out that's from the stamp set to decorate my branch. I'm going to trim off that excess of the branch because I don't need that hanging off the side. And then this little guy, he's going to sit on the log with the vines that we created out of the woodgrain cardstock. And then that leaf's going to just go behind him. Now I can add the little decorative piece to the end of my pull tab. And I'm just using liquid glue, and I use my tweezers to hold it in place while that glue dries. And then finally, I'm using that solid heart again and some festive berries distress oxide, and I'm going to stamp a couple hearts onto the background to kind of fill that empty space in the middle, even though they're going to get hidden once that leaf kind of swings out of the way. And then here is my finished card. I love how that leaf swishes out of the way to reveal the other chameleon hiding behind it on a branch. I just think it is so cute.
Thank you so much for those gorgeous cards, Shari. I love how that cute little rainbow is going into the chameleon with the clouds, and this swish and pop is so much fun. I love the big reveal and that you can see both chameleons when you pull that leaf out of the way. It's absolutely adorable. And next up, we have some super cute cards by the design team, and this one by Lynette is adorable. I love how she used some die-cut letters to make the sentiment the star of the show. Here, this card by Megan is so cute. She combined our Crazy Antics set with the little chameleon, and as you pull the swish and pop, the little chameleon goes over and gives the little guy a little kiss. I think that's so sweet. This card by Letitia is so fun. I love that this chameleon is a perfect match for our ladybug and leaf die. And then here, how is that so cute? Sending a chameleon hugs. I love Elise's custom sentiments so much. This card by Audrey is so sweet. I love that heart with the sun die cut behind it. The colors are gorgeous too. And this card by Yanea is beautiful. Look at her watercolor background and how she used magic messages behind the chameleon. So amazing. I love this really cool, colorful shaker card by Grace. The portrait slimline is such a cool style for this chameleon. And here is a look at a similar idea, but in a landscape slimline. And I love these flip-flop chameleons because it's so cute how they can look at each other from across the card. Here, Grace has made the cutest card using our Thinking of You border. I love that these borders are so delicate that you can do something like curve them around a little circle. Also, how cute is it that she has the giraffe separated like that? I adore this card. Lynette made two beautiful floral cards here with the Thinking of You line border, really creating this nice bold sentiment on this really great die cut card. And her color palette, I think, is just so gorgeous. I want to decorate a whole room in it. And then this card here by Mindy is so sweet. It's got our cute little Dandy Day mice hanging out with that Thinking of You border blending into the grass. I think that's absolutely stunning. We cannot wait to see what you guys do with this cute little stamp set and the new Thinking of You line border, so please share it with us. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. Bye!